All right, young scholars. Today we are going to be working on our healthy snacks zip. So go ahead and download that zip file. When you download it, it'll look zipped. You right click to extract all, and then you'll have the regular folder that you can open up in Android Studio. Now, while that's loading, go ahead and download any 5 specific images of something you might be interested in that are all grouped together in the same concept. So I went ahead and chose the 5 different Monstars from Space Jam back in the 90s as my specific images to run. But you'll notice our app is fairly similar to what we ran on Monday. In this instance, we have 5 different healthy snacks with a toast message, selected snack, and whatever position. But you'll notice when you're clicking on them, you don't even see that 5th image. They're all over because we have 2 columns set up. So we'll go through this today and make some changes to it. So again, you want to download that healthysnacks.zip, extract it, and while you're opening that and allowing it to build and open all your files within Android Studio, go in Google search for any topic of your choice that might have 5 particular images. I just did it with the Monstars because a basketball starting lineup, 5 players, pretty simple for me to utilize that. Once you've gone ahead and downloaded your 5 images, you're going to take them into the app folder, the SRC or source folder, main, res, and then drawable, and paste them within that new folder, or those new images rather, within the drawable folder. And you know you've done it correctly if your files now sync up and all of them are listed within the drawable folder. So it could be your 5 favorite baseball players, say you're a fan of the 76ers, maybe you just pick the 5 players from the starting lineup. Maybe you have a top 5 list of dogs you want to adopt. Anything that would give you 5 specific images you could use for our purposes here so that we can modify our healthy snacks Again, once you've done that, as I mentioned, those 5 images should sync up with your drawable folder, and now all of them are visible. So I don't know if these are the right names of my Monstars, but those were the ones that were listed when I downloaded them. Blanco, Bupkis, Copia, Pound, and Tiny. So as I mentioned a while ago, for our purposes, it doesn't necessarily matter what the image type is, but usually when you're building these quote unquote for real, you want to have a PNG so it can be transparent. And let's say you change the background color to purple, no issues with those images. So once we have that all set up, you want to open up your strings.xml file. Which right now just has app name, healthy snacks, IV large, healthy snack images. Right here is our app name, healthy snacks. So you're going to want to change that healthy snacks to whatever specifically represents the 5 images you just downloaded. So I'm going to change mine to say they're Monstars, like Porky Pig says in the original movie. So when I build, and then run, and now instead of saying healthy snacks, it should say they're Monstars. What happened? No, it doesn't like I have the apostrophe, so I'll just try they are Monstars. But now you'll notice instead of healthy snacks, they are Monstars. And you'll notice when we show you the view, we have two columns set up. So our fifth image is kind of just run off to the side. And whenever you click on the images, the image view floats over that grid view. So next, what I'm going to do within our strings.xml is I'm going to create a new string. So string name equals, I'm going to call it TV title for text view title. And I'm going to call it Monstars starting lineup. So string name TV for text view title, whatever would specifically describe your 5 images, and then close out the string. We're going to use that to create a text view within activity main. So once you have that set up, you notice here, just like on Monday, we have a grid view and an image view. The grid view is those pictures grouped together. The image view is that expanded image when you have the on click. So you'll notice here within the grid view that we have number of columns set up to be 2. If we go ahead and change that and bump it up to 3, we'll now have 3 images on the first row and 2 on the second row because we only have 5 images total. So instead of 2, 2, and 1, we have 3 and 2. Now the display is a little off due to the different sizes of the images. That's fine, since we're going to replace them eventually. But then when you click, you have your image view pops up with the toast message. It's still a little over the specific balances. So now what you want to do is go into your main activity Java file. So I'm going to change the name of my array to Monstars. So then I have to go through every instance where it says snacks. I now have to change it to say Monstars. And as I scroll back up, I might as well modify my toast message. Instead of selected snack, I'll just say Monstar number. And this way it says Monstar number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. But then I have to scroll back up and change my images. All of the r.drawables within the array oops, it's blanco to whatever the 5 image names are that you've uploaded or downloaded and placed into your drawable folder. If they're not in the drawable folder, you have to make sure that you add them to the drawable folder in order for the Gradle to be synced and the app to run. So now instead of 5 healthy snacks, I'm going to have 5 ugly monsters. You'll notice here that there's still a bit of an overlap with that viewing screen. So if we go back into our activity main and change number of columns from 3 back to 2 and sync, and then run the app. Now it's going to be, instead of a row of 3 and 2, it'll be 2, 2, and 1, like it was initially with the healthy snacks. But again, that last image is kind of weird looking, cropped off, little changes to it. And when we click on it, the image view overtakes it. So just like we did on Monday, we're going to play around with our grid and image view. But what we want to do first is we have this string we set up, TV title, text view title, Monstars starting lineup. We have to put that somewhere. So it goes within our activity underscore main, where we now create a text view. So you'll notice automatically when I typed in text view and hit enter, it asks us for a layout width and and layout height. So the first thing that we're going to do is create that layout width and have it be wrap content. Then the same with the layout height, wrap content. But before we go any further, we want to identify our text view. So we do Android : ID equals, within quotes, at plus ID slash, and I'm going to call it TV/monsters. Yours would be TV, whatever specifically of your 5 images you've downloaded. So TV players, TV stars, TV cats, whatever specific your 5 images represent. Next, we need to set out the remaining layouts. So first, Android : layout underscore align parent top equals true, which aligns our text view with everything else within the app. Then Android layout underscore center horizontal, which centers everything horizontally, and that is equal to true. Then we're going to pass that string we created called TV title. So it's Android : text equals, within quotes, at string slash TV title. So what that now does is, within our text view, it's going to display whatever we have in that TV title. So for me, it's just OnStar starting lineup. For you, it might be my favorite cats, my favorite pictures, whatever specifically it might be. Then we're going to set our text size. So Android : text size equals, and I just made it 30 SP. This way it's big, but not taking over the entire screen. And then last but not least, we need to add in constraints. So we do app : layout underscore constraint end. And as you type it out, you'll notice that it begins to show up for you to select. So the first one we're going to select is end to end of equals parent. So when the quotes popped up, you notice there were options. You would double click parent. So since we did end to end of, we now have to do the opposite. Constraint start to start of. And again, when you double click that, it gives you the options of what to put in your quotes. We're just going to select parent so that it matches everything else we've done in our app. So then we need app : layout, constraint top to top of. And again, we're going to select parent. However, our last constraint we're going to show up, or set up rather, as layout constraint vertical bias, and just set it as 0.999 because I want to show you something specifically. And then you close your text view with the slash and the less thans. So if we were to run this, file build, or sync rather, and then run this, would this text of Monstar starting lineup show up? What do you think? Is that text going to show up or no? Oh, everybody's going to wait till the app pops up and they can answer based on what the app shows. Monstar's starting lineup shows. But it's all mishmash together. So what we want to do is first go into our main activity file, click where it has the import ... so that all our imports show up. And we want to add an import for our text. So import Android widget text. Then we scroll down a ways. We see here we have a grid view set up and a image view set up. So right after that final image view pick equals find view by ID r.id.id large. We're now going to find view by ID r.id. Whatever you named your text view. So in my instance, it was TV Monsters. So when you click on your image, we have that toast message that I changed it to, Monstar number. But everything's still kind of out of whack. We can't really see the Monstar starting lineup text. When we click an image, that fifth image is kind of blocked out. So we have to go back in to our activity underscore main file and basically play around with those constraints for all of our three views in order to have them show up correctly. So you notice here, app layout constraint vertical bias. That's a pretty big number for the text view. So within your other views, that is going to push your specific view all the way down to the bottom of the app. But I wanted to point out with the text view, it's always going to populate at the top of the screen. Android Studio assumes that you want your text view to be the first thing everybody sees after the app name. So even though we have it at 0.999, which means it should be all the way at the bottom, because it's a text view, it's placed and displayed at the top. So the first thing we'd like to do is increase our vertical bias within our grid view. So right now it's 0.04. Let's change it to 0.24. And then we go ahead and sync to see how far down it dropped that grid view. Is now our text view going to be visible and easy to look at? If it is, we could keep that vertical bias the way it is. If it's not, we'd have to continue to play around with that number to make it bigger so that the text is visible. It's not behind the images from the grid view. So now we can see our text view, Monstar's starting lineup, and there's even quite a bit of white space there. So instead of maybe 0.24, we could maybe have it be 0.13. And then sync again. Then run and check to see that everything still looks good. You want a little bit of white space, but everything should be aligned fairly well. There you go. So that Monstar's starting lineup is still visible. You can see it, but there's a little less white space in between that text view and the grid view. But our last Monstar there, might be a little depressed there. We can't really see all of him. So we might have to play around with the height and specific widths within our grid view. So right now we have two columns, and each column is set up to have a width of 150. So what are the possible ways we could modify this? Well, you can go ahead and change your columns from 2 to 3 and make your column width size smaller. So for example, we could change that from 2 to 3 and that from 150 to 100, your column width. Then you'd go ahead and run to see how that specifically looks. And you may want to do this in the app that you're building. Have a grid view, have an image view. And these are all the things you need to play around with and check. Are the sizes good? Can we modify them? What do we need to change in order to make all of our views visible, easy to look at? Make sure everything we need to see is visually there. So now you'll notice that, okay, still doesn't look right. We have some of our images blocked over the others, etc. So let's go back to what we initially had. 2 columns, 150 for our column. If we were to go ahead and change our layout height from, let's say, 400 to 500, so our layout height from 400 to 500, and build that, and then try to run that option, we might be able to see all 5 of our images fully. So it would be 2, 2, and then the 1 in the 3rd row below it. And that now works. However, our Monstar starting lineup is covering it a little bit. So we have to go back and modify our vertical bias for our grid view. So instead of 0.13, maybe now we change it to 0.17. And go ahead and sync again. And then run it. And hopefully our text view and our grid view are no longer overlapped. And there we go. It's looking a little better. Monstar's starting lineup is not floating over. But you'll notice here there's a little white line in between the columns here. That is what these lines, vertical spacing and horizontal spacing. So it's basically 2 display pixels, right? So for the horizontal spacing, you're not even really seeing it. You're just seeing the vertical display. So if we didn't want that, we wanted to get rid of that, I would change that vertical spacing. Actually, the vertical is the one we can't see. So we would change the horizontal spacing down to 0, and then sync and run. And in theory, it's going to get rid of that little space in between those images. Let's go ahead and check that it fixes that for us. And it didn't. So we may want to go in and drop our vertical spacing as well. But that's solely, like I said, if you don't want any spaces in between the images. And if it doesn't get rid of the spaces, it may just be the way the images are set up, which is perfectly fine. Sometimes you'll see images like on Instagram where the image is in the middle and there's like a black box around it. You might have images that have that kind of situation going on. And by dropping both of them, it gets rid of the space. But when we click on one of our monstars, we're still having that same problem we had on Monday. Our image view is going too much over our grid view. So the last thing we need to do today is play around with our image view in order to make sure that everything fits right. So as you saw on Monday, ideally we're going to play around with the layout height and the vertical bias. So let's go ahead and increase the vertical bias first. So right now it's 881. Let's make it 991. Now we go ahead and sync. And run. By changing that vertical bias, that image is now as close to the bottom as possible. However, we still have, whenever we click on our image, it's going over our grid view. We can't even see that fifth guy. So we then need to go back into our activity underscore main and change our layout height. So we increased our vertical bias. What would we do for our layout height? Increase or decrease it? We'd want to decrease it. It's basically the height from that bottom, that vertical bias. So right now it's 400. If we decrease it to 300, let's see what happens. If we'll get our image view, grid view, and text view all looking good, all taking up their own specific area of the app without overloading one another. So we checked to see if shrinking to 300 worked. Nope, we still have our overlap. Whichever monster we click on still overlaps our fifth person. Who's that? I guess that's Tiny on our grid view. So you'd continue to play around with that layout height. So I'm going to drop it to 200 now. And this is what they did with Instagram when they first put all the code together. How do we make it so that all three in the grid view, on that first row look good? So when people click on and expand and make it bigger, that, it's not completely different. It all looks well and it's visually appealing. So that's ideally what you want to do with your apps. Make them visually appealing. So this is what you have to do. Make sure that every piece, in this example, grid view, image view, text view, all fit within your app display and look nice. So we click, we still have a bit of overlap. So right now it's 200. I'll just drop it down to 100. And ideally, that can work for us. The other thing you could do, if you so chose, was to modify the height for your grid view. So I'll run the new setup I just changed for the image view first, and then I'll show you that. Now, if we click, we have our lasting fellow there. So you see how small it is. So we may want to bump it up to, let's say, 150. But while that's building, I'll go back to the grid view. So we went ahead and increased the layout height to make sure that all 5 of our Monstars showed up here. We could continue to play around with that to match exactly. Okay, make it to where we don't have anything cut off at all. So I went for image view, brought it up from 100 to 150. Now let's see if there's a lot of white space still. Nope, it looks pretty good. Maybe we could bump it up to 170 to make it look even closer together, but that's perfectly fine the way it is. You'll notice though for the image view that the description is currently listed still as healthy snack images. If you wanted to change that, you would go back into your strings and change the Ivy large healthy snack images to, let's say, we just say great bowlers. When we click back in, after syncing, that description for the image view is now going to say great ballers instead of healthy snack images. So the description is basically like a caption when you scroll over a specific image on a picture. Oh, this is a river in Montana. This is a mountain in Pennsylvania, etc. So like you saw on Monday, the more images you add in to your integer array, which as I mentioned on Monday, it's an integer array because each of your images is being assigned basically an index like you would see in an array. So as you've seen here, these 5 images are pretty big. So within your grid view, when you have your column width set up as 150, you might want to go ahead and modify the column height. So if we went in and did Android dot column height, and let's say we just made that 75 display pixels. If we went in, synced up our Gradle, and then run it, it's telling us that it cannot find that instance. When you make an error, usually it gives you the option to click on it and solve the step. But for our purposes, like I said, you might want to modify the height in that instance. So it looks like you can't do it specifically for the column. So you would have to play around with the entire layout. And you continue to make the changes necessary to fit all three of your specific views. So that is all I had intended to cover today. So as a reminder, for your app number 3, due on Sunday night, you're going to modify either of these that we've worked on today. So with the endangered species, we started with 6. I think we ended up with 12. You could go back to 6. It's up to you. Or you could use this healthy snacks with 5 to have images of matching characteristics. For example, your favorite basketball players. Make sure you modify the toast message to match your image types. So here within main activity, I modified it to just say Monstar number, and then it gave their position. You saw the other day, we did a little longer toast message. That's entirely up to you to decide. But you're going to submit your modified main activity, which should include the name change for the array to describe your images. So like today, I did Monstars from snacks. On Monday, I changed from, I think it was animals to costumes, right? And you would go ahead and modify your code as necessary throughout the activity, the main activity.java file. So anywhere it would say the array name, you'd have to change. And then also submit a simple screenshot running the app with the images. So I would recommend clicking, take the screenshot now when the toast comes up over the image. It's entirely up to you. And I'll even say this, maybe I'll give you extra credit if you also add in a text view to your specific app number 3. So you would add the text view just as we did today within your activity main file, and you'd set it up in strings to indicate what the text is, your TV title. So you would have to add a new string in to the strings.xml, call it TV title so that it displays right at the top, and then add your text view in to your activity underscore main, and then in your main activity file, you'd have to find it. Where is it? Do I need it? Where is it? So you would submit all of that, the main activity, the code, the screenshot of the image, and like you said, if you so choose to add in a text view, I'll go ahead and give you extra credit for doing so. So if there's no questions, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see everybody on Monday.